And welcome, fight fans, to another episode of Before the Baldman Speaks. I'm your host, as always, Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence. You can find me on Twitter at any time at the Clown Kid. Joining me this week to help break down the main event between Robbie Lawler and Carlos, the Natural Born Killer Condit, from UFC 195. Helping me break down all the action, Nick Baldwin. Nick, how you doing, man?
Not too bad. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on once again.
Yeah, dude, always good to chat with you. It seems like I'm seeing a lot of you now that you and I have been co-hosting MMA Junior Radio together. Hope everyone who's a fan of this show takes some time to check out our new podcast together, MMA Junior Radio, rather. Nick, fantastic main event. We keep having fantastic. Ever since the departure of GSP, we've had nothing but fantastic 175-pound or 170-pound championship fights. Robbie Lawler retains his title in maybe a controversial decision. What did you think about tonight's main event?
Well, it was an amazing main event, as advertised, as expected. It was exactly what I expected, to be quite honest. I expected it to be technical, but as the fight went on, I expected both of them to kind of just unleash and throw down and rock each other and just put on a very early fight of the year candidate. They did exactly that. Robbie Lawler retains the welterweight champion. I know a lot of people, probably the majority of people, scored it for Condit.
Yes.
I personally scored it for ruthless Robbie Lawler. 3-2.
What round
I gave him 2, 3, and 5.
Okay.
I believe it was the third, maybe. That was very close. I know there was one that was really close.
Yeah, I think that what was really close, I think that you could really want to give Robbie Lawler round 2 and round 5. I think that those were very clearly his rounds. And I think you really want to give Robbie a clear first round and fourth round. Yeah, those were him kind of pulling ahead, and you could see that. That third round was very close. I think the biggest shots of the round were definitely landed by Robbie in that third round, but I think that the volume later is what made me give the third round to Carlos Condit. People are talking about robberies here. I'm not really seeing all that. I see a very close, very tight title fight with some pretty definitive rounds and some back and forth happening. Yeah, go ahead.
Even if I scored for Condit, gave him 3 rounds, whatever, by no means a robbery. You gotta think Robbie Lawler's the champion, so he's gonna have a slight edge when it comes to the judges. Should that happen? Probably not, but it's still. But yeah, this wasn't a robbery. They threw down for 25 minutes, and yes, there were some clear rounds opposed to a round that I believe the third or whatever. That really could have gone either way, but all 5 rounds were still close. For that reason, you can't really say it was a robbery, even if most people thought it was clearly Condit's victory. Yeah, it was too close to call a robbery, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, and also, fans who are watching this live, new for 2016, tweet at any time with the hashtag BTBMS, Before the Baldman Speaks, every single letter or the first letter in every single one of those words, and we will read your tweets on air. Let us know what round you scored the main event for here between Carlos Condit and Robbie Lawler, because I know there's quite a little bit of debate going on right now. Like I said, I eked it out for Carlos Condit. I didn't think it was that big of a victory. What I think mostly when I see this main event and I see a fight like this play out, a 5-round fight and a tough, very close fight, I think that this is a failure of the system that we use to score mixed martial arts, in that a 10-9, well, it's essentially a 10-9 system because we just don't see enough 10-8s, but a 10-must system in MMA really doesn't do justice to how a fight should be scored. I've been an advocate of making scoring and judging simpler, in that at the end of it, judges should just pick who the winner of a fight is rather than scoring individual rounds. I just feel like this sport, it doesn't make sense necessarily with the small amount of rounds, particularly in a 3-round fight. But even in a 5-round fight like this, sometimes you end up turning in a card for a winner of someone who you may have thought didn't win the fight. And that's a fight like this for me. I'm turning in, if I'm a judge, a scorecard of, 3-2 for Robbie Lawler. I mean, excuse me, for Carlos Condit. But ultimately, I think Robbie Lawler wins this fight. I feel like in the critical last moments of the fight, Robbie Lawler had what it took. And if this fight were to continue until one man was finished, that Robbie Lawler looked like it was going that direction, at least with all the evidence that was presented to us within those 5 rounds. What do you think about the 10-9 system? Do you think that, we need to get rid of it? I'm not asking you to, come up with an alternative today, but at least we could say, like, is this a problem or is it not a problem for you?
I don't know. Judging is definitely a problem because we see way too many bad decisions or even robberies than we should. I can understand once or twice a year where we see a fairly controversial decision where it's like, no, there's no way this guy won, and he did so. But most of the time, no, maybe not most of the time. There are a lot of robberies and bad decisions, but I think it's just we need more judges, honestly, because not every single person in the world, it's only 3 people scoring a fight that can even decide who's the champion after 25 minutes, who isn't champion, etc., etc. We just need more judges. And I don't know how to solve this, but we need better judges. Honestly,
yeah.
Some of these judges, I really don't know if they're the best judges MMA commissions and MMA organizations have to offer. Bring in even 5 to 10 judges a fight and take off the worst few on either side and then take the average. There is a better system. I'm not sure if it's removing the 10-9 point system, but there's definitely something that needs to be done related to the judges. I'm not sure if it's the scoring system, though.
Yeah, I've always advocated that we increase the number of judges. I think that having undercard fights have 5 judges and championship fights, could even have as many as 9 judges. I know that, this poor Nevada Athletic Commission can't spring the money for maybe, $6,000 more to get a couple more judges to get seats. But, I think someone can figure out how to pony up the money. I think we have enough people willing and wanting to do it. We've talked a lot in both our podcast and this show about the incompetency of athletic commissions, and the Nevada Athletic Commission's probably, one of the more inept ones. So I don't want to go down that path because it was such a great fight, and I don't want to distract us from kind of, a really great resurgence from Robbie Lawler. What I was thinking about right before I started this show was think about how different a reign like Robbie Lawler's is at champion as a Benson Henderson. Benson Henderson had a lot of close fights like this and a lot of controversial decisions where a lot of people thought he lost, but he retained the title. And he had 0 public support and really no one on his side when it came to the hardcore fans and people really supporting his performances, despite kind of being in a similar situation as squeaking by. Robbie Lawler squeaked by kind of and got a controversial decision winning the title. Obviously finished Rory McDonald, so there was no controversy there, but here we go with the second controversial victory. And it's just very interesting how you have one champion getting by the skin of his teeth sometimes, but because he's such an exciting fighter and because he brings such a great style that's very violent, fans are super behind Robbie Lawler as champion.
Yeah. It's because Robbie Lawler is a fan favorite. I'm not saying everyone dislikes Benson Henderson, but I will say Lawler is a bit more likable. He's a fan favorite because of this resurgence as of late. He went from a guy that really looked to be on his way out, he's fading, everything like that, to now the UFC welterweight champion. Benson Henderson, he didn't have this resurgence. He was never a fan favorite. Robbie Lawler has been in the game for a long time, and I'm not discrediting Benson Henderson here. I'm just crediting Robbie for what he has been able to do over the past couple of years, including win the championship belt. And for that reason, fans are more willing to side with Robbie after a somewhat controversial, to me, not controversial decision in his favor, because even the Condit's also a fan favorite, just because they like Robbie so much. They don't care that he won.
They care that it was an awesome fight.
Happy that he won.
Yeah.
It's still a bad decision. Should fans be like that? I'm not really sure, but I think that's why there are differences between Robbie's current reign and Benson's former reign.
Yeah, let's read off some of these tweets out here. Wes Colvin out there says he gives the first, the third, and the fifth to Robbie Lawler, and still, I saw a lot of that, and I think a lot of what we're going to hear from people are our agreement on what round you gave who in the main event here. John King says he'd appreciate it if we swore a lot to make him feel less angry. I scored the third for Robbie Lawler, like I said in the middle of the fight, controversial third from Lemon GF. We were talking about that. As soon as that third round happened, I knew that it was going to be a catalyst for this split decision controversy.
Yeah.
It just, with the way the first two rounds went, it just made sense that it would. And then Flying Brian says he scored the first, the third, and the fourth for Condit, giving him 3 rounds and in the title. Before that main event, it was a spectacular main event. Clearly, the early fight of the year, and a very, out of 12 fights that we did have, it was a great, main event. And I thought that this event actually did a really good job of slowly building to a fantastic conclusion. Even in the main event itself, the fight kind of had a slow simmer and really poured it on at the end. In the co-main, though, let's move on to that. We had Stipe Miocic against former UFC heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovski, and just putting in a showcase highlight reel KO victory. What did you see from Stipe? And Joe Rogan kind of announced that he was the obvious contender for the 265-pound strap. What do you think about that claim and the quick KO from the boy from Ohio?
Does he deserve it? Probably, but will he get it?
No.
Probably not, because like we said on our show, I want to say a week ago or so, Alistair Overeem with that knockout over JDS, he's the more marketable fighter. He's the free agent right now. Do people love him? No. Do people love Stipe? Typically, yes, but Alistair is more marketable.
Yeah.
A Kane or Verdum fight versus Alistair will sell more than Kane or Verdum versus Stipe. I'm not sure if Dana White was loving that Joe Rogan seemed to be giving Stipe the title shot, because I feel bad for Miocic in the sense that I don't think he'll get it. But I'm not sure if Rogan was in the position to basically put Dana and the matchmakers on the spot and forcing them to give Stipe the title shot. Will they give him the title shot because Joe Rogan said that? No, but I'm not sure if that looked all that great, especially when they don't announce, or especially when they announce Stipe versus the Rothwell Barnett winner or something like that. It's tough to say.
Yeah, it just seems like something that was in the air, but I like when Joe goes on, kind of one of these random shoots and just decides he's going to be matchmaker in the immediate, even though we know that that's not how things work in the UFC, but that's what we're going to do because it's Joe Rogan and fuck it, who cares?
And I like this new Stipe, honestly. He was he's always been a character on Twitter, but he really hasn't connected with fans or the media in real life, but he was fired up after that under 1 minute knockout of Andrei Arlovski. And fight wise, he looked fantastic.
He complimented Joe Rogan's shirt.
Yep,
that was dope. I thought that was pretty fly.
Exactly. He did everything he has to do to get the title shot, except he won't get the title shot.
Yeah. People on Twitter live watching now, hit us up at BTBMS. Do you think that Stipe Miocic should get the title shot? I don't think he's going to get the title shot. I'm with you, Nick. I just can't. From what I know about how the UFC likes to behave in situations like this, I know that they're going to give it to a name. I think Alistair Overeem's really, right there as the name. They've always looked for an excuse kind of to give him a title shot. He's very high profile. I think he'll sell great on pay-per-view. I think he has a loyal following. I think people remember that Brock fight. There was a good rub on that fight for him. So it's going to be tough to beat that, especially after the JDS KO. He KO'd JDS. You lost to JDS. That's kind of a hard argument to beat at the end of the day, too.
Exactly.
Let's, if we're being realistic about stuff.
Then again, Overeem does have the losses to Travis, Bigfoot,
and Rothwell. Yeah, I mean. But it's short memory.
You have to look at the recent fights. Recently, Stipe lost to JDS. Recently, Alistair beat JDS. So it's pretty tough not to go with Overeem in that sense, and because he, like I've said, and like you said, he's the more marketable fighter.
Yeah, definitely. It's just to me how the UFC does business and how they're going to go about it. But it takes away nothing from today's performance. I think Stipe is really making himself into a marquee person at 165 pounds, which is very hard right now in the UFC. You know, you need multiple big stage performances where you shine. He shined in the Mark Hunt fight. He shined in this spot here. Maybe he just needs one more good high-profile, shot, performance, a highlight reel in front of an audience, and then he can get that big title fight. I hope they give him a good matchup. I hope he gets, set up with someone he can get another highlight reel and make his case, ironclad, so to speak. Before that, we can. Oh, hold on. I'll read off. I got some people here. John King says, "I'm the only one who doesn't want." Talking about something completely different. I'm the only one who doesn't want Condit Hendricks or Lawler Woodley. No, yeah, I don't want any of those matchups either. Those matchups don't excite me at all. After watching that fight, I'm actually 100% okay with seeing a rematch of that in the title fight. That seems to be a sentiment floating around right now.
Other than that, yeah, you have to do Lawler Woodley, and that's really just not all that intriguing to me. I'm not sure if that would be a fantastic fight.
I'm sorry for T. Woodley in a lot of ways because he's caught in that crossfire. But you know what, man? It's tough because there is so many exciting matchups and some action fighters, and he's whacked some people, definitely. He's had some exciting KOs, so I don't want to say he's not exciting, but I'm seeing these high-level guys and all this happening, and I'm scared that he's going to get in that mix and not deliver. I don't know if that fear is unwarranted, but...
And plus, he hasn't fought for nearly a year, so you don't see guys coming off over a year layoff getting title shots too often, unless they're, for whatever reason, it's gonna sell or something like that. And Tyron Woodley, not many people are begging for Woodley to get a title shot. With no disrespect to Tyron, but it makes sense, but I'm not sure if the UFC will do it. Because for the same reason they did Lawler Condit initially, Tyron Woodley deserved the shot. He beat Condit even. How that fight would have gone if the injury didn't occur, I'm not sure, but he definitely deserves it despite a few losses, as pretty recently Roy McDonald and etc. But I think they'll do a rematch probably. Right now I think it makes sense. I think Dana and the matchmakers will think it makes sense. Sure. Especially because Condit arguably won.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree with this, but did they seem calm? I don't think that this had a huge audience for some reason. It just seemed, the arena seemed less than full. Twitter didn't seem as active as before. I mean, the hardcores were out there, of course, but it just seemed like this didn't go mainstream. I hope that a Robbie Lawler fight can eventually go mainstream, because it should. That's a good fight.
It absolutely should. This was already a very early candidate for Fight of the Year. But no, it definitely was far from mainstream. The only UFC cards that would be mainstream, Ronda Rousey, which of course who now is not even the champion, and Conor McGregor, barely. Yes, that was a huge pay-per-view. I wouldn't say Conor McGregor is mainstream though. But yeah, Lawler Condit, it's not going to do well pay-per-view buys. It's not going to do well attendance, everything like that. Gate.
It'll just be too much fun.
Especially coming off UFC 194. Yeah. One of the better cards of the year, breaking records, everything like that. People can't buy $70 pay-per-views every month. The hardcores do, but the casual fans don't. And
I would have liked. Yeah. I would have liked to see this do 500,000 though, not like crazy mainstream numbers. Yes. You know,
it deserves that, but it's not going to get it. I wouldn't be shocked if it gets 300 or even less. If I had to guess, I'd guess 300 to 350. Yeah. But it's not going to do well.
Smart. I think that's a smart number. Let's talk about this a little bit. Alan, it's not a Tumanov. In a really kind of close fight, a lot of ways. With Lorenz Larkin, I thought it was a clear-cut victory for him. It ended up being a split decision. Um, kind of out of the questionable judging and some split decisions that we had tonight, I would say that this was maybe the most clear cut of them all. Albert Chumanov looks impressive. Lorenz Larkin looked impressive too. I think this is something that really rose though Tumanov's stock. What do you think about his performance tonight? What do you think about his future in the 170-pound division? Has he got himself to the level where he can toss his name in the top 5, top 6?
No, definitely not. And I'm high on Albert Tumanov. I
Yep.
think he's at the level to be a ranked fighter, but definitely not in title consideration, in title talks. Even below that, he's really not at that level quite yet. He doesn't have that big win to launch him into the deep waters of welterweight. And you got to remember, welterweight is one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC. Um, and there are some very good fighters in the top 10, even in the top 15. I'm not 100% sure Albert Tumanov is at that level. He very well could be with his, especially with his knockout power. He can put anyone away. I was very slightly disappointed with his performance. I liked this fight. It was a very good fight. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously Lawler Condit will steal fight of the night honors, but I was expecting a fairly quick knockout from Tumanov. I thought he could put Larkin away fairly quickly. Larkin not known to have the best chin, and then moving down in weight last year. Usually when you move down in weight, your chin gets worse, but ultimately it was a good fight. Fairly impressive performance. Not quite what I was expecting, but with Larkin Tumanov, it was a fairly good fight. You can't be too disappointed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought this is a better than average fight. If you're asking for my grade on it was a B minus. So I was actually, that's a C is an average fight in my book. This is a much better than average fight. I thought the skill
Definitely,
level
yeah.
was very high. But I'm with you that it was kind of unimpressive from Tumanov's point of view. I just it's not unimpressive in that his skill set was unimpressive and that he didn't beat a very talented fighter. It's that in these showcase moments when you have a pay-per-view spot in the 170-pound division where you really need to make a name as a finisher, you got to get finishes. And I know Lorenz Larkin is a dangerous guy, and those leg kicks probably did take out his ability to land with power in the third. Have to you have to make the most of these opportunities, and you have to, land big shots and, close out fights. I know it's an unrealistic expectation almost from high-level fighters that, when they're fighting other ranked guys, they have to get finishes. But it's that kind of a world right now for you at 170 pounds if you want to get into the top 5, if you want to toss in with the Johnny Hendricks, Tyron Woodleys, Robbie Lawlers, Roy McDonald's, Carlos Condits. So it was disappointing, but not all that much disappointing. I think he should be happy with the victory because there was some shaky moments there. Interesting tweet from John King over here, who's on fire on Twitter right now. Thoughts? He forwards us a tweet from Megan O'Leary. Carlos told me he might be done with the sport. Carlos Condit here. I hope he makes whatever decision is right for him, but man, what a freaking fighter. I wouldn't be shocked. It's been a lot of years for Carlos. Another title loss. But I really just don't take fighters seriously either way, whatever they're talking about. Immediately after a big loss, a split decision loss at that, a fight that a lot of people will score for him, a fight that he thought clearly that he won. So I just won't take anything that he says seriously right now. We'll wait and see. If he did do that and decided to retire, it wouldn't surprise me all that much. It seems like he's financially secure and fairly healthy, and he's done a lot in this sport. So no shame if he decides to walk away. What do you think about it?
Like you, I wouldn't be surprised either way. If I had to predict his future, I would say we see him inside the octagon again, and probably even multiple times. He's still a top contender, so I really don't see why he would walk away. However, if he does decide to retire from MMA, despite the loss, what a great way to step away from the sport, coming
Yeah.
off a Fight of the Year candidate over Robbie Lawler title fight. Many people thought he won. Other than the only better way you could leave the sport is by beating Robbie Lawler, of course. But yeah, he has been in the game for a long time. He's taken a lot of punishment, despite his chin has held up, of course, as we saw in the fight earlier tonight. But yeah, I guess I wouldn't be shocked if he retires. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't retire. But yeah, you can't 100% believe what he says, because chances are he's going to go back to Albuquerque, think about the decision, rethink what he said, blah, 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 and decide, oh, well, I'll keep going. I'll get into a couple more wars before I call it quits.
Yeah, wait until they decide to give him the winner of Cowboy Means.
Exactly.
He'll love it and come right back. Let's talk about the rest of this main card, and kind of pick up the pace. We'll zoom through these a little faster here. Brian Ortega gets a third round late submission against Diego Brandao in a fight he was losing. Really impressive stuff from Ortega, I thought. Like I said, in my opinion, he was losing that fight, and locks up a submission when all seemed lost. Diego Brandao, a guy who won tough, has had a lot of back and forth. He's not even training at Jackson Winklejohn's anymore, so there's a lot of questions around him. So do you still value this as a really big victory for Brian Ortega, or do you just kind of brush it off as kind of the decline coming from Diego Brandao?
No, I definitely don't think Brandao is declining really at all. If he is very slowly and not too much, I was impressed with Brian Ortega. The fight went almost exactly how I expected it to. I thought Brandao would definitely go out there, guns blazing in the first round, try to take Brian's head off. I thought he wouldn't be able to do so. It was close, but I called that. But the second round, I thought Ortega was going to come out and win that second round, go take him down, look for the submissions, even beat him up on the feet a little bit as Brandao slows down. But Brandao just continued what he was doing at a slower pace in the second round than what he was doing in the first round, of course. But then Ortega goes out there in the third round. His corner says, go for the takedown. He does just that. Locks up the submission, a very nice choke, and that's a wrap.
Yeah, I thought Brandao looked a little bit more reserved and patient, and I thought that that's a good move for him long term in his career. I think Brian Ortega is dangerous, although I question kind of how far he can go in that 145-pound division. It's just kind of a murderer's row once you get up over a certain, like I always say, there's levels to this shit, Nicky. There's levels to this shit.
Right now, the slow start type of thing, go out there, lose the first couple rounds, and lock up the submission in the third round.
That ain't going to cut it against Chad Mendes, dog.
Exactly. It's working for him now against guys like Diego Brandao and Thiago Tavares, but now he's ready for a step up in competition. He has two fairly big wins over two dangerous guys. I wouldn't be shocked if they give him a top 15 opponent next, and this slow start, lose the first couple rounds, and make a comeback in the third. It's not going to work for him when he fights top competition, which is what he's going to fight next, probably. He definitely needs to start quicker. I can understand the stay back against Brandao, but he definitely has to improve his game at the beginning of the fights in order to be considered a contender.
Yeah, definitely. And then to start off the whole pay-per-view tonight, Abel Trujillo with a very quick first-round submission victory over Tony Sims. I kind of liked how Tony Sims looked in this fight too. Started out kind of, very weary of the power from Abel Trujillo, but kind of as soon as they had a first takedown exchange where that Sims kind of engaged a takedown, something I thought he would be very successful in later in the first and in later rounds in this fight. Abel locked in just a nasty guillotine choke and just seemed to have a really good squeeze and a really good angle. Kind of how he fell, he like scooched up onto his back, so he had a lot of leverage and was just able to kind of arm straight crank that guillotine choke and get the finish. I'm impressed by Abel Trujillo here, but more than that, I think that Tony Sims got caught in a bad position. Abel Trujillo, dangerous 155-pounder, will kind of always float outside of the rankings, but will definitely be a guy who can get you.
Yeah. Overall, I was impressed with him here. I don't think the fight went on long enough, or Sims did enough in that time on the feet to say Sims looked good in this one. Yeah, he was winning up until the submission, but that was only a few minutes, like 3 or 4. But yeah, Trujillo, I picked Abel Trujillo here in the first round, but I definitely didn't think it would be by way of a submission.
No.
Very surprising performance from Trujillo here. A little disappointing for Tony Sims, now losing 2 in a row. This could be the end of his career, but definitely a must win for Abel. But yeah, ultimately, you have to be impressed with him. First round submission, can't get too much better than that.
Yeah. All right, let's discuss just some of the highlights from this main card, and we're going to do them rapid fire, and then we'll talk about our favorite moments of the fight. Michael Mayday McDonald, shout out to Flying J. Bryan. He mentions he may have landed one whole strike the entire fight, but still managed to get the submission second round victory. Looked like he was in a nightmare spot and just had a slick transition out of there. Biggest favorite on the card, kind of a heart attack moment for a lot of people who put the juice. I think actually a lot of people were betting the underdog there, so maybe the bookies were taking the sweat bath there. What did you think about Michael Mayday's return to the octagon after 2+ years?
Well, he got the job done for sure, and the actual finish was very amazing. The whole transition and everything like that, getting out of the choke and then ending up getting the submission win himself over Kanehara. But Masanori Kanehara, he looked pretty good in that first round, and then of course in the first half of the second. It's tough to say with this performance where McDonald is at, whether or not he's still a top contender, because McDonald, this was basically a lose-lose situation from here. Yes, he's coming back and got the win, and he can celebrate and say, I'm back. But this was against Kanehara, who wasn't even in the top 15. Even with the 2 years off, McDonald was number 6 or so in the bantamweight division. Definitely a big win for him, but it was a must win. I can't say I was overly impressed, but he still got the job done. And I'm looking forward to seeing who at what level he can fight really at this point.
I think it is still a question mark for him at 35 pounds. I think that times move fast, and MMA is just like a quick sport where a lot of young people learn a lot of techniques and evolve, become there's just a lot to keep up on, a lot of tactics, a lot of technique. Especially in that kind of division where everyone's really good at everything. It'll remain to be seen how good he can remain being at 135 pounds. But take nothing away from him, he won the fight. I think that this was actually a big win in the loss for Kanehara or Matsunori. He did a great, he had a great job and controlled a lot of the fight. Just kind of lost concentration, lost focus in the last couple seconds there. Moving on, we had Justine Kish beat Nina Ansaroff in kind of my least favorite fight of the night, if I'm being honest. I thought that they did a good job, and I think a lot of the reason why this was my least favorite fight of the night had to do with the unanimous decision victory put in. There was 230-27 scorecards put in for Justine Kish in a fight that was clearly the second round was won by Nina there. So I just find that to be an unforgivable scorecard to submit, and I think a lot of it has to do with the quality of the MMA being performed in that fight as well. But I just don't see how you can watch this sport and have taken a look and actively watched that second round and have put Justine Kish as the winner of it. I just don't see it. I scored it for Nina, scoring her the first in the second. I think I gave Kish the third. I don't mind, you giving the first and the third to Kish and giving her the victory. I just think that second round, that's an unforgivable scorecard. Besides that, I don't think there was anything very remarkable about this fight. You have anything to add on it?
Early on, it was a scrappy fight. It was looking like it might be all right, but as it went on, it kind of stalled a little bit. Definitely not a high-level MMA, far from it. I can't complain that it was boring. I scored it for Kish. It really could have gone either way. I didn't really care either way. But yeah, I guess it was an okay fight. I know Adam Martin really enjoyed it.
Oh.
So
Adam Martin is a better man than me.
yes,
Oh, you know,
exactly.
I skipped a fight on this card, and that was Kyle Noke losing another controversial decision
Yes, yeah.
against Alex Moreno. Yeah, I'll go with Moreno on it. I don't get this fucking decision at all as well.
No.
I guess they're scoring the first and the third to him. I had a 30-27 to Kyle Noke.
So did I. Most people had a 29-28 Noke, but I had it 3-0.
That's fine. That's fine too. I get that. Yeah.
Yes, despite the submission attempt from Morono in the third round, which was very close, that doesn't win you a round. Noke was clearly winning up until that.
But let's ignore. The second is a clear score to Kyle Noke, right? And I think even all the judges agreed to that. But I thought he won the first too. I don't think it was that close.
No, I don't think so either. I think it was close, but it was still very clear for Kyle Noke.
It wasn't a runaway round, but it was a round that I don't get how you put Alex's name on it because I don't remember the shots he landed.
No,
maybe I don't know. This is another one where a 10-9 system, the issues with the 10-9 system, or maybe more to your point, just having smarter fucking people in these chairs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, Nick?
Some of these judges, I just don't get it. We had these judges tonight really were not that good. We had a lot of controversial decisions. Starting out on Fight Pass, Joe Soto, Michinori, Tanaka. I scored that for Soto. Tanaka got the, I want to say, a split decision. Then you have Kish and Anzor.
I don't think that was so controversial. I think that the last two fights that we mentioned, Noke losing to Morano and this Kish fight, I think those were way more, just really, really inept scoring happening in those fights. You know,
it was definitely
that's something you point to and say this is something wrong with the fucking sport. You know what I mean? You could talk about the Robbie Lawler Condit fight. You could talk about the Joe Soto fight, but those had arguments of what they. If you sat down, gave me your argument for why you scored it to either one of those fighters in both fights, I could sit there and listen to you and say, yeah, that makes sense. You know, we disagree maybe, but still, your points are logical, and at least you're actively watching the fight. These scorecards, these two fights are indicative of someone who doesn't know what they're seeing.
However, Kish Anzorov was a close fight. I scored it for Kish. Lots of people scored it for Anzorov. Some people scored for Kish. So I'm definitely not upset about that one.
Well, also, it was a garbage fight, and no one cared about it.
Yeah. Noke Morano. I didn't see it. But the thing with judging and controversial decisions and quote-unquote robberies, yes, Noke Morano was a bad decision, but this didn't have a major impact, if any impact at all, on the welterweight division. I can clearly see Condit winning the fight. Like I said multiple times, I scored it for Lawler, but if I was someone who scored it for Condit, I would be more upset about that because of the major implications. This was for the freaking UFC title. This was to decide who is the best 170-pounder currently on planet Earth. Noke Morano was not a UFC title fight. So I would be more upset.
Bring out the second-tier judges. That's what Nick said.
yeah, exactly. But either way,
fine.
Judging is a problem. But yeah.
There was a 4-fight, there was I think 475 or 170-pound fights on this card, and it was probably the least relevant, even less relevant, I think, maybe than what Sheldon Westcott's going to do, and maybe we'll get to that a little bit. Scott Holtzman, who was a guest on MMA Junior Radio, lost a unanimous decision victory to Drew Dober in kind of a fight that was noteworthy in that it was unexpected. If you were going to tell me that one fighter was going to grind out a clearly dominant 3-round victory against another fighter using wrestling, before this fight, I would have told you that Scott Holtzman won the fight. But it seemed to be Drew Dober saving his UFC career here. What did you see in this fight, and what are your takeaways?
Even though we had him on the show, I was fairly confident in Scott
Yeah, me too.
Holtzman to get the job done. I actually thought he was going to finish Drew Dober, who really hasn't looked all that good in his
Mhm.
previous fights. And as of late, coming off the submission to Efrain Escudero, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I really haven't been impressed with Dober.
Yeah,
Um,
just a surprising
what
result.
yeah, was Holtzman's debut against Anthony Cristodolo super impressive? No, he got the job done, but it was against Anthony Cristodolo. But with that being said, I thought he was a more skilled fighter. I thought he was going to win. I thought he's an up and comer. But Drew Dober proved me wrong. He surprised fans by grinding out a decision here. I really don't have too much more to say than that.
Yeah, uneventful fight. Ultimately, in that spot,
Yeah.
as well. The main event of UFC Fight Pass. Let's chat about this because this actually is a really relevant fight. For the future of the division. Diamond Dustin Poirier with a clear unanimous decision victory over Irish Joe Duffy. He came into this fight as an underdog. There was a lot of there's a lot of hype around, Joe Duffy and a lot of, talk about him being the last person to beat Conor McGregor. Big fight for the 155-pound division. Diamond Dustin is kind of right outside or right on the top 15. But just looked really good here. Broke his nose early, but just gritted out and dealt with the pain, used his wrestling, and kind of brought the fight to Joe in a way that Duffy didn't really have an answer for.
Yeah, this was a very fun fight. It really lived up to my expectations. I thought Poirier was going to win this by decision. But yeah, I guess good on him for taking it to the ground when he needed to. I'm not so sure Poirier has the best chin in the world, so when he was getting tagged, he would take it to the ground. So definitely smart game plan from Dustin Poirier. Joe Duffy definitely has holes in his game, but I will say that don't overlook Joe Duffy from now on. He's only going to get better at TriStar. He's only getting better, and I still think he is a possible future contender of the lightweight division. I tweeted out right after the fight, even though I was picking Poirier, still don't overlook Joe Duffy now. People will do so because of this loss, and they will regret it. He's going to come back better than ever, pick up a win. Even though Conor was not the same fighter he was now, there's a reason Joe Duffy was the one to beat Conor McGregor because he's a very good fighter. Dustin Poirier, though, has been overlooked for a very long time, ever since he got KO'd by Conor, even before that. Ever since he got KO'd by Conor and he moved up, people were like, this guy really not a contender at this point. I never thought that. I always knew he was a contender. I think he beats I think he beats a handful of guys currently ranked in the UFC rankings. I think he's right up there. Is he in title contention? Will he ever be? I don't think so, but I think he's on the cusp of that.
Yeah, I always think that Diamond Poirier and whether he's at featherweight, whether he's at 155 pounds, is one of those guys who's always going to be 4-5. He's always going to be there. He has that will and just that the skill and the technique now to go with that will, to be in contention. I don't think he can be the guy. What's great about him is, though, he's extremely young. He's at a great camp. People want to get behind him. He can get some really great talented people to help him shore up the parts of his game. Will he ever do that? I'm gonna have to wait until I see evidence in the cage that I know he can really contend in a title spot. But he's always a name, and I think 55 pounds suits him. Especially for the later part of his career. Hit us up on the hashtag B2BMS about where you think Diamond Dustin Poirier belongs in the 155-pound rankings. I'm going to talk really quick about the last two things, and then I want to bring up some news that broke right here, while we're live on the show. Michinori Tanaka beats Joe Soto, probably the end of the UFC career for Joe Soto, and Sheldon Westcott also beats Edgar Garcia. probably the last we'll see of Edgar Garcia in a very well, at least it was a very quick fight, if it wasn't a very skilled one. The news that I wanted to talk about, Nick, is that Dana White announces that Stipe Miocic is going to receive the next title fight in the UFC heavyweight division. A very surprising announcement, in my opinion. We just talked about it 5 seconds ago, how we thought the UFC doesn't work in this way. But it seems like everything's surprising today. I guess the UFC is changing the way they do business. Maybe Stipe's a name now.
However, don't believe Dana White. He always said, title shot Miesha Tate, title shot whoever. Wait, like literally they said to Tyron Woodley, to his face or whatever, you're going to get the winner of Robbie and Condit. I think that same day, that evening, Dana said, we're not sure. It's like, Dana White, don't trust what he's saying. If he says Stipe is getting the winner of Verdun Kane, definitely consider that that's going to be the case. Definitely believe him somewhat. Think that this is this will probably happen, but don't 100% say it's going to be Verdun Kane versus Stipe.
Fighters, until you sign that bout agreement, the promoter is not required to make you do this. The promoter is not your friend. He will stab you in the back. You don't have that fight, Stipe, until you sign that bout agreement.
However,
a lot could happen. You know,
I'm not a fan that Dana White goes out there delivering title shots and taking them back. I think when he says it should be final, but it's not a signature on the dotted line.
But Dana is a promoter. Dana promotes the UFC. He just wants word, hype, news. That's what his job is. I don't get upset about Dana-isms anymore. And if you what's a Dana-ism? A Dana-ism is handing out title shots, taking them away. Calling this guy the pound-for-pound champion, and then the next week calling the next guy who's up the pound-for-pound champion. This is just what the sport is. It's the hype game. He is a hype man. He is the guy in the rap squad who has the chain on, who says the punchline to every other lyric. That's what Dana White's here to do, people.
I agree, but title shots can change a fighter's career. Stipe Miocic, if he beats the winner of Verdun Kane, that can completely change his career. Being the quote-unquote pound-for-pound king in the UFC.com rankings that are developed by journalists that are very biased, especially down in Brazil. I'm not sure if that exactly. A title shot does mean a lot. Being the pound-for-pound king or something else Dana will say or promote or hype does not. For that reason, I'm not a fan that Dana just kind of gives out title shots whenever he wants. But it's Dana White. He can do what he wants, I guess.
I don't want to talk about it that much more, but I will say that Alistair Overeem's in contract negotiations with the UFC, so this can be a huge power move on their side with those negotiations. If you remember last time Alistair Overeem had contract negotiations with the UFC, I think they inherited his contract from someone, and he gets paid a pretty penny. He gets a lot of guaranteed money on his bouts. I don't even think he has win bonuses. Just the structure of the contracts that Alistair Overeem had weren't very UFC-like. There was a lot of guaranteed money and not a lot of tied up in win bonuses, which is very unlike them. Interesting things with Alistair Overeem. Maybe some power moves by the UFC, giving Stipe the cheaper guy probably the UFC or the next title shot, and I think that's important to look at. But we're kind of running to the end of the show here, Nick. I wanted to we'll bring up one more question that someone wrote down on Twitter, and like I said, you can keep hitting us up at BTBMS before the bald man speaks hashtag on Twitter, and we'll read your questions. All that MMA said, what was more deserving of a performance of the night? Ortega's comeback or McDonald's comeback? Nick, what were your two performances of the night? So you get to be Joe Silva tonight. Pick your two bonus winners.
I think you got to give one to Stipe. I think this one, his knockout is one most people will forget about, not because it wasn't a good knockout, but because you have like the quote unquote comebacks with Michael McDonald and Brian Ortega. But I'll definitely give one to Stipe,
Yep, I agree.
and I gotta go with McDonald, to be quite honest, because even though Ortega's submission was very cool, very slick, the McDonald one, he was in a lot of trouble. He was very close to tapping, and then he kind of just used the last effort he had, the last bit of energy, and got out of it, and ended up getting Kane Hara in his own submission. So for that reason, I'll give it to McDonald. But there are a few guys that really deserve bonuses on this card.
Yeah, I actually gave my second performance. I agreed with you on Stipe Miocic. I gave my second one to Abel Trujillo just because I thought it was a really slick move. It was very quick, dominant, and it's so surprising to see a guy like Abel Trujillo lock up a submission. So I was entertained. So he gets my nod. One final question before we talk about our obvious fight of the night and grade the card. We had one question here from Flying Brian who says, please talk about STEM. Those who don't know, the original Face the Pain music made its return in this pay-per-view. I thought we had moved into a new era, Nick. I thought we'd moved into a new, more enlightened era of the UFC. And that new enlightenment was, symbolized by our new techno version of Face the Pain. We can't go completely away from being complete meatheads. But we could be, techno meatheads. We can at least be modern meatheads, I thought. But I was wrong. For such an old school fight, they needed old school music. And Stem's Face the Pain came back, and God, do I hate this fucking song, Nick. Nick, if I could go back in time, if I had one opportunity to use the time machine, I'm going back just to eliminate the lead singer of Stem. That's the root of this problem, man.
So you like the techno version more?
Oh my God, I do. As much as that is just a steaming pile of horseshit, it is an infinite better piece of horseshit than the regular Stem track. Good Lord, new metal. It's 2015, Nick. It's 2015. We can't have new metal playing. It's 16. Yeah, oh my God, thank you. But still, the point remains the same. We cannot have our sport defined by new metal. Like, casual fans cannot watch the intro to that pay-per-view and not instantly be turned off a little bit. I really think that. I think that the most embarrassing part about being a UFC fan is during the main event that plays as like a thing to hype everybody up. Come on, people.
Non-MMA fans look at non-MMA fans look at MMA fans in MMA events thinking the only people that watch this are hillbillies and rednecks and whatever. And this is just contributing to that. It will turn off non-MMA fans. I don't really care about it because it's intro music, and I don't care what intro music they use.
I care, Nick. The whole presentation, it's the aesthetic. It's like the bread and circuses of the whole thing. It's, it's how it's all being, made. What kind of a mask are we putting on this charade? Because the reality of it is that we're sanctioning people hurting each other. We're like, all right, guys, everyone,
I guess
we have to put a pretty face on it.
I guess you'll have to mute your broadcast during the intro for every pay-per-view after.
At least when friends are over. That's the truth.
Yes, exactly.
I'm hoping for a return for Techno Stem. I didn't think it would come to this. 2016's broken me so quickly that I'm hoping for the return of Techno. Face the Pain. Jesus Christ. All right, Nick. I've had enough. I've tapped. Let's give a grade on the whole card. Put the card as a whole. I know in America or in Canada, it's slightly. It takes a little bit more to get a fail, I think, in Canada than it does in the U.S. A to F. What letter do you put on this?
That's a tough one. Overall, the card was not bad. Obviously, main event, like I've said already 10 times, fight of the year candidate. You have great performances on the main card, a couple of submissions, a pretty good decision, a knockout. I'll go with it's tough to say, maybe an A- to a B+.
Yeah, solid. Yep, I agreed very much with you. Overall, I gave this card a B plus. It was a lackluster card and was kind of floating around the B minus, C plus, and then we had a really great fight with Stipe Miocic getting that early knockdown. I liked that a lot, or knockout rather. And I gave that
Like
fight
the
an A
first,
minus, and
the
then I
first
gave
three
the main
fights were good.
event card an A. Yeah,
The first three fights delivered. Then you had a 3-fight streak that really just
that
was
didn't
not
deliver.
that great. Exactly. And then you have, from there on out, everything else more or less delivered, in my opinion.
But it's just like I say, if it's just like in school, you put a good final paper together, you give that co-main event and you deliver on that main event, it's gonna affect your grade more than those earlier fights. And so for me, it's a B plus in a really solid start to 2016 for the UFC. Nick, man, thanks so much for doing the show. Why don't you tell the people out there where they can see you and where they can read what you're doing in regards to MMA and everything you're doing?
Yeah, so once again, thanks for having me on the show. I can't keep away from you now. We're doing interviews together. We're doing the show. But yeah.
Buddies forever, Nick.
Exactly. Follow me on Twitter at the UFC. Check out my writing, MMAjunior.co, my website, and BloodyElbow.com and MMAsoccer.com. Check out our podcast, MMA Junior Radio. Last week, or this week, whatever you want to say, we had Ray Borg and Scott Holtzman. Next week, we have a few local guys on the show. So check that out. Other than that, I think that's about it.
Yeah, man, we got some great interviews that have happened, some great interviews brewing at MMA Junior Radio. I'm really excited to interview fighters. I think we're building a little rapport here, Nick. We're getting a good vibe happening with the fighter interviews and with the podcast, and I'm liking how everything's happening. Thank you, as always, for doing the show. Shout out to everyone who watched live on YouTube, and people who tweeted at us and hashtag B2BMS with your questions during the show. I want to continue doing that for as long as people want to tune in live and discuss with us everything that's happened directly after the fights. Thank you all for watching live, and thank you for supporting this podcast. Thank you to Nick, my guest. And as always, take it easy. Peace out. Have a good night.